Hello everyone, my name is Struan and I'm a scientist at Izon Scientist, and today I'll be demonstrating how to do a run on the AFC V2. First, your sample needs to be prepared appropriately, so it can be loaded on the qEV column. Today, I'm using human plasma, which requires centrifuging to pellet any large cell debris or coagulated protein that could block the frits in the qEV column. Preparation guides for different sample types, such as cell culture media and urine, can be found at support.izon.com. Once the sample has been prepared, plug in and switch on the AFC at the rear. Install the carousel plate and the appropriate column mount. Today, we will be using a qEVoriginal Gen 2 column, so we will need to use the qEVoriginal column mount. Next, your AFC will need a scale calibration. To do this, select Settings, then Scale Calibration, then press the Start Calibration button. Follow the on-screen instructions to calibrate the AFC scale using the 10-gram weight provided. Check that the nozzle is clean and undamaged. In particular, check the tip for a small crystal of salt that can form if the nozzle is left with buffer in it. To remove this crystal, you can simply dislodge it with a pair of tweezers. If you need to, replace the nozzle by opening the valve in the setup menu and installing a new nozzle. Follow the instructions in the user manual. Mount the carousel and check that the nozzle aligns with the flush position. This is the hole without a groove for a collection tube lid. To change the alignment, select Carousel Calibration in the Settings menu and maneuver the hole to be directly below the nozzle. Then press the Set 0 button. Select your column to be mounted on the AFC. Remove the top cap first by twisting the latch wings and pulling up. Then remove the bottom cap and quickly place the column into the column mount. Securely push the tip of the column into the tube adapter. The drip tray should catch any drips from the column. Twist the column to align it so the Izon logo faces outwards to align the RFID tag with the reader. It is key that you remove the top cap first, as if the bottom cap is removed, you will damage the resin bed by pulling on the top cap. First, check the collection parameters at the bottom of the screen are correct. You can set the fraction count, volume of each fraction, and the buffer volume amount before any fractions are collected. Touch the button for the corresponding parameter to change the collection parameters for those you are interested in. For example, if you are interested in collecting the total volume of purified EVs from your sample as a single fraction aimed at EV recovery, set the count to 1, the volume to 2.8 mils, and the buffer volume to 2.5 mils. Seeing as your collection volume in this scenario is larger than 2 mils, the AFC will ask for a single 5 mil tube to be loaded into the carousel to collect this. The default settings are optimized for a balance of EV concentration and purity, collecting 4 0.4 mil fractions after a buffer volume of 2.9 mils has flown through. The buffer volume is the amount dispensed into the center of the carousel before the first fraction is collected, in addition to the 0.3 mils dispensed to account for the volume in the nozzle. The default buffer volume has been optimized to collect EVs and similarly sized particles from human plasma. Set your own buffer volume using the buttons, or press 0 buffer volume to set the buffer volume to 0 to collect everything except the 0.3 mil nozzle volume. Press Start Collection to begin. This will ask you to confirm your collection settings before proceeding. Load your carousel with labeled collection tubes, ensuring that the lids are open, flat, and facing the center of the carousel. Place the carousel on the carousel plate. Secure it in place by aligning the locking pin into the hole on the carousel. Then place the cover on top. Some things to check at this point is that your tubes are labeled clearly, in the correct order, open, the correct size for your collection volume, and that the lids are flat and facing inward so they don't hit the cover. If you are collecting more fractions than the carousel can hold, have a second carousel of tubes ready to load. Then press the OK button. Place the buffer reservoir in the top of the column and press OK. The AFC will now ask if you would like to flush the column. Izon recommends you should always flush your column with at least 2 column volumes of buffer before loading sample. If you are using a running buffer that is not PBS, flush with 3 column volumes of your new buffer before beginning your run. If you select no, you'll be prompted to flush the nozzle with 1 ml of buffer. This option should only be used if you have just cleaned and flushed your column and are loading a subsequent sample. Select yes to flush the column. Load 17 ml of buffer into the reservoir. And press OK to continue. Check that the waste tube is draining into a collection vessel or sink and press OK. As the buffer is flowing through the column, check that there are no air pockets in the nozzle. Once all the buffer has run through the column, press OK to continue. The AFC will now prompt you to have your running buffer on hand and to load your sample onto the column. For this, we are loading 0.5 ml of human plasma. Ensure there is no residual buffer in the column above the loading fret, then load your sample. Then hit start. The lighting will turn red as the buffer volume and samples are collected. Wait for the sample to run fully into the fret. Then, carefully fill the reservoir with enough buffer to collect your samples and buffer volume as indicated on screen. The AFC will automatically dispense the buffer volume into the middle of the carousel, then collect the requested fractions. If you are collecting more than 1 carousel worth of fractions, it will prompt you when to load the second carousel with a short alarm and the lighting will change to yellow. Once all your fractions are collected, the lighting will change to green and you will be prompted to unload the carousel. Then, close your collection tubes and press OK. You'll then be asked if you would like to flush or clean the column. Columns should be cleaned between samples and prior to storage. Flushing is typically only if you are unconcerned with residual carryover between samples. Select Clean and remove any residual buffer from the reservoir. Then add 8.5 ml of 0.5 molar sodium hydroxide to the reservoir. Then press OK. Check that the drain tube is still draining to an appropriate location and press OK. Once the 8.5 ml of sodium hydroxide has flushed through, press OK. You will then be prompted to load 17 ml of fresh buffer into the reservoir. Then press OK. Once the buffer has finished running into the frit, press OK. The cleaning process is now complete, and the column can be run again or stored appropriately. Add a small amount of buffer to the column to prevent the frit from drying out. The cleaning and storage regime depends on the column you use. Check out support.izon.com for the cleaning and storage recommendations for each column type. If you have chosen to flush your column rather than follow the recommended cleaning steps, and you would like to clean the column later, you can run the cleaning program at any time by going to the Settings menu and under the Fluid tab, selecting the Clean Column button. Your run is now complete and your fractions are ready to be used for your downstream applications. You can now switch off your AFC. Please visit support.izon.com for more information or if you have any questions.